Imagine you're standing outside on a really clear, dark night, right? And you look up at a star that is, say, 5 billion light years away.
Right.
For the last century, classical and quantum physics have told you a very specific mechanical story about what is actually happening in that moment. You are told that a tiny particle of light, a photon, was born in the nuclear furnace of that star. And it physically traveled across the cold, empty void of space for 5 billion years. It survived, the immense gravitational pulls of black holes and entire galaxies.
Yeah, quite the journey.
Just to end its epic cosmic journey by smashing into the retina of your eye.
I mean, it is a beautiful story. It's also an incredibly comforting one because it gives us a universe made of tangible things moving through space, a courier delivering a message.
Right, exactly.
But when you strip away the poetry of that and look strictly at the underlying ontology of that model, it requires us to accept an astonishing number of paradoxes.
Like wave-particle duality.
Exactly. Wave-particle duality. Spooky action at a distance. Massless particles that somehow, inexplicably, still possess momentum. I mean, we have spent the last 100 years inventing increasingly bizarre mathematical patches to explain why the physical universe just refuses to behave like the neat, transmission-based clockwork we desperately want it to be.
Which is why our mission for you, the listener, today is going to be so deeply disruptive.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you are a professional physicist running quantum simulations or, an electrical engineer designing circuits, or just an academic researcher questioning the foundational assumptions of your field. We are asking you to put down the standard model textbooks for this deep dive.
Just set them aside for an hour.
Right, because we are exploring the truly revolutionary framework of Sandeep Chavan. Specifically, we're drawing from two highly provocative works today. The first is Rethinking Energy, ripple tension, not substance, and the second is light, neither a wave nor a photon.
And look, we need to frame this properly right out of the gate. We are not going to be debating minor mathematical tweaks to quantum field theory today.
No, this isn't about adjusting a constant.
Right. Chavan's universal energy dynamics, or UED framework, it attempts to completely deconstruct the very thingness of the universe.
The thingness.
Yeah, it demands a massive shift from a transmission-based reality, where particles flow and waves physically travel, to a resolution-based reality.
Okay, so what does a resolution-based reality look like?
It's a universe that is characterized entirely by absolute stillness, geometric tension, and local field alignment.
Wow. Okay, so before we can even touch the concept of light or the quantum observer, we have to tear down the most deeply ingrained concept in all of science. We have to talk about energy.
We do. We have to start there.
Because from middle school thermodynamics all the way up to advanced astrophysics, we are taught to treat energy like a fluid.
Like a tangible substance, yeah.
Right. We talk about pouring energy into a system. We say a battery stores energy. Yeah. We consume it. We basically built an entire global civilization around the semantic assumption that energy is a substance you can possess and transfer.
And Chavan argues that this entire concept is just a linguistic leftover. It's a metaphor that we accidentally mistook for empirical reality.
We took it way too literally.
Way too literally. In UED, energy does not exist as an independent entity. It is not a fundamental constituent of the universe.
Wait, so it's not a thing at all?
No. It cannot be stored in a vault, and it cannot be transferred like water in a bucket. Energy is redefined entirely as a symptom of field imbalance.
Okay, a symptom. I want to make sure I understand the mechanism here, because calling energy a symptom completely upends basic thermodynamics.
It flips it on its head.
Right, so if energy is the symptom, what is the underlying disease? Like, what is the field that is supposedly out of balance?
So Chavan calls it the structured vacuum energy substrate, or SVE.
SVE.
Right, and you have to discard the idea of the vacuum as an empty passive void where things just happen to float around.
Okay, so space isn't empty.
No, the SVE is a tension-bearing, intelligently structured medium that permeates all existence. Think of it as an absolute stillness that prefers a very specific, stable geometry.
A preferred resting state.
Exactly. When a local system is in perfect alignment with that SVE geometry, there is zero tension. There is no measurable force, no heat, no motion.
So basically nothing is happening. It's a state of total rest.
Total resonance. But the moment a local structure deviates from that preferred geometry, like, say, if an atomic lattice is compressed, or if a chemical bond is forced into an unnatural angle or mass is displaced, it falls out of sync with the surrounding vacuum.
And the vacuum doesn't like that.
It hates it. The SVE inherently resists this misalignment. It desperately wants to return to geometric harmony. So that local strain, that ache of the structured vacuum trying to snap back into absolute stillness,
Yeah.
that ache is what we are measuring when we record energy.
Wow. So the analogy here is less about a fluid and more about, like, a fever.
A fever is a great way to think about it.
Because a fever isn't a physical substance you can extract from a patient's bloodstream and put in a jar. A fever is a biological reaction to a systemic imbalance. So energy is just the field's fever.
The field's fever is a highly accurate way to visualize it, and Chavan actually maps this concept mathematically onto our observable reality, and he does it without needing to invent invisible Courier particles.
Okay, let's get into the math.
He introduces what he calls the master relation, which states that energy, E, is proportional to delta T multiplied by A.
Okay, I want to look closely at that math because this is where the UED framework has to actually prove itself against classical mechanics.
Right, the rubber has to meet the road.
Yeah. In the standard model, we measure energy in joules, which involves mass, distance, and time. How does Chavan's equation replace that? What exactly are delta T and A?
Well, the delta T represents the duration of misalignment. It is the strict measure of how long a localized system has been held out of structural balance with the SVE.
Okay, so time spent in tension. And A?
The A stands for the amplitude of the ripple deviation. It's essentially the physical severity of the geometric distortion, like how far has the system been pulled out of its preferred vacuum alignment.
Wait, so time and amplitude replace mass and velocity.
Conceptually, yes.
But how does measuring the time and size of a vacuum ripple account for the physical work a machine does? Let's take a really concrete example, a car engine.
Okay, sure. Let's look at combustion.
In classical physics, combusting gasoline releases chemical potential energy. That energy expands gases, which then pushes a piston. Energy causes the change. How if E is proportional to delta T times, explain a moving car without energy acting as the causal force?
This is the massive ontological flip of UED. In classical physics, you view the chemical energy of the gasoline as the instigator, right?
Yeah, it's the fuel that makes the thing go.
Right. But in UED, the highly complex, unstable hydrocarbon molecules of the gasoline are already in a state of severe geometric misalignment with the SVE.
They're already tense.
Very tense. They represent a massive localized amplitude of ripple deviation. That's the A in the equation. When the spark plug ignites the mixture, it destroys the molecular constraints holding that severe tension in place.
The structural dam breaks.
Exactly. The structure fails. The sudden expansion of gases pushing the piston isn't caused by a magical fluid called energy being released.
So what causes the push?
It is caused by the SVE violently forcing those atoms into a simpler, lower tension geometry, water and carbon dioxide. The motion of the piston is simply the mechanical byproduct of the vacuum snapping back toward absolute stillness.
So energy didn't cause the change at all?
No. Energy was the visible consequence of a system straining against the vacuum's geometry, and the motion was the resolution of that strain.
Okay, look, I hear the philosophical elegance of that. It's a neat framework. But as someone who respects hard, observable science, I really have to push back here.
Go for it.
It is incredibly hard to accept that power isn't stored. Let's look at a much simpler mechanical system before we even touch atomic physics.
Okay, a mechanical system.
If I take a heavy industrial steel spring, right, and I use a massive hydraulic press to compress it down to a fraction of its size, and then I lock it into place with a heavy steel pin, am I not storing potential energy in that compressed spring?
Classical mechanics says yes.
Right, because when I pull that pin, that spring will launch across the room. Doesn't that prove, objectively, that energy was waiting inside the seal?
Let's analyze your compressed spring through the mechanics of the SVE substrate instead.
Yeah.
When you use the hydraulic press, you're not injecting a ghostly, invisible substance called potential energy into the atomic lattice of the steel.
I'm just pushing metal together.
Yes. You are physically forcing the atomic bonds of the iron and carbon atoms into severe, unnatural geometric compression. You are creating a localized zone of extreme ripple tension against the structured vacuum.
I'm forcing it out of alignment.
The SVE wants those atoms in a specific resting alignment, and you are defying it.
So the steel pin is just holding a state of geometric agony in place.
Yes. The spring is in a state of high ripple discomfort. And the duration of that lock, how long you leave the pin in, that is the delta T in the master relation. The amount you compressed it is the amplitude, A.
Right. And when I pull the pin...
When you pull the pin, the spring doesn't release stored power. The SVE substrate violently rejects the unnatural atomic geometry and forces the steel atoms back into their preferred alignment.
The vacuum pushes back.
Exactly. The kinetic launch of the spring across the room is just the turbulent wake of the vacuum resolving its local tension. You didn't store energy. You engineered a prolonged state of structural misalignment, and then you let the universe fix it.
Wow. Okay, well, if we apply that logic to mechanics, we have to escalate this to the ultimate expression of stored energy in modern physics.
I assume you mean E equals mc squared.
A nuclear bomb. Yes. The entire foundation of the atomic age is built on the premise that mass and energy are physically interchangeable, that an unimaginably vast ocean of destructive energy is locked inside the nucleus of a heavy atom, just waiting to be unleashed.
Right, the vault of power.
If energy is not a substance, how on earth does UED explain a city-leveling detonation?
Chavan fundamentally reinterprets Einstein's famous equation. In the UED framework, mass is not a vault-holding hidden power.
Then what is mass?
Mass itself is merely a highly complex, stabilized ripple configuration within the SVE. A heavy atom, like uranium-235, is essentially a tightly weaned knot of vacuum tension.
A knot?
Yeah. The strong nuclear force isn't some separate magical glue. It is the localized compression of the structured vacuum holding that specific, highly unnatural geometry together against incredible systemic strain.
So if mass isn't a battery of power, what does E equals mc squared actually calculate?
It acts as a mathematical exchange rate for ripple tension. It tells you exactly how much field imbalance is required to sustain a specific geometric knot of mass.
Oh, I see.
So when nuclear fission occurs, say, a stray neutron destabilizes that uranium-235 nucleus, we are not converting physical matter into pure energy fluid.
We're just adding a neutron.
Right, and the addition of that neutron pushes the geometric asymmetry of the nucleus past its breaking point. The SVE can no longer sustain the knot.
And the structure unravels.
It undergoes what Chavan calls ripple disintegration. The knot snaps flat.
Snaps flat.
The immense localized tension that was required to hold the nucleus together is suddenly no longer needed. So the structured vacuum rapidly and violently rebalances itself.
And that's the explosion.
The blinding light, the incinerating heat, the concussive shock wave, none of that is stored energy escaping a vault. It is simply the chaotic, localized shear waves of the vacuum snapping back into lower tension alignment.
The field doesn't explode in a burst of power.
No, it violently sheds excess stress in a desperate bid to return to absolute stillness.
That flips the causality of the entire universe on its head.
It really does.
I mean, we look at a nuclear explosion and we think the universe is violent because it's full of explosive destructive power. But under UED, the universe isn't inherently violent at all.
No, it is fiercely committed to stillness.
It's fiercely committed to stillness. The violence only occurs because we force it into unnatural geometric strain, and it aggressively corrects our interference.
Exactly. When a system undergoes ripple disintegration, it is not becoming powerful. It is becoming free from geometric strain. It is moving rapidly toward coherence.
Okay, if you are an electrical engineer listening to this while driving to your lab, I know your warning lights are flashing right now.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Because if energy isn't a substance, and it isn't stored in batteries or atoms, we have to confront the reality of how we supposedly move power around our civilization.
We have to talk about electricity.
Yes. What exactly is flowing through the copper wires powering the device that the listener is using to hear my voice right now?
To answer that, we have to dismantle the most pervasive, comforting metaphor in all of electrical engineering, the Drude model. Or, as most people know it, the water in a pipe analogy.
Right. Since the late 19th century, we have basically taught that a wire is a pipe, voltage is the water pressure, and electrons are tiny physical droplets of charge that flow down the pipe to deliver energy to a device.
Because it makes intuitive sense.
It really does. You connect a battery, it acts like a pump, and it pushes the electron droplets through the circuit.
It makes intuitive sense, but under UED, it is a complete fiction. Chavan calls this the illusion of flow.
The illusion of flow.
Yes. We must completely discard the concept of electrons acting as traveling couriers carrying little backpacks of energy down a wire.
No backpacks. Got it.
If we return to the SVE substrate, the tension-bearing medium, electricity is not a flow of particles. It is a synchronized, field-wide negotiation of ripple discomfort.
Okay, let's break that down mechanically, because I wonder what's happening. If a battery isn't a pump pushing electrons, what is actually happening chemically and physically inside a standard AA battery under the UED model?
Well, a battery relies on chemical reactions at the cathode and anode, right?
Right.
In classical terms, we say this creates an excess of electrons on one side and a deficit on the other. But in UED, those chemical reactions are actually creating a severe structural misalignment with the SVE.
They're building up tension.
You are establishing a zone of extreme ripple tension at the negative terminal and a different gradient of tension at the positive terminal. A battery basically imposes a persistent ripple tension gradient on the vacuum.
Okay, so the battery is just a localized generator of SVE discomfort.
Exactly.
But when I connect a copper wire between those terminals, doesn't the current have to flow from high pressure to low pressure? I mean, something has to move.
The copper wire is not a hollow pipe. A copper atomic lattice happens to be an environment where the SVE can ripple and realign with exceptionally low resistance. The wire is a highly sensitive tension channel. When you close the circuit, you are not opening a physical gate for traveling electron droplets. You are connecting two zones of severe SVE discomfort.
And the vacuum reacts to that connection.
Instantly. The vacuum instantly recognizes this conductive path and attempts a field-wide realignment to resolve the tension gradient.
So what we measure as electrical current in amperes, what is that physically if nothing is moving end to end?
It is the domino-like sequential reorientation of the local SVE geometry around the copper atoms. The electrons aren't traveling globally from the battery to the speaker in your headphones.
They aren't.
No. The localized field is just shifting its geometry atom by atom, accommodating the systemic strain.
And what about voltage?
Voltage is not physical pressure. It is the mathematical gradient of unresolved discomfort. It's a measure of how urgently the vacuum is demanding realignment.
Wow. Okay, so if the wire is just a tension channel and current is just the field negotiating discomfort locally, let's scale this up to the macro level.
Let's do it.
Think about a massive national alternating current power grid. The hydro plant, the high voltage transmission lines, the substations, all the way to the outlet in a residential wall.
Right.
If nothing is physically flowing across the country, then a power grid isn't a river system delivering water. Is it more like a massive continent-spanning tuning fork?
The tuning fork analogy is remarkably close to the UED reality, provided we look at how the resonance is generated.
Right, how is it generated?
Look at the massive generators inside a hydro plant or a coal facility. Classically, we say spinning the magnetic coils produces electrical energy. In UED, a generator produces absolutely nothing.
Because energy can't be created. So what is the spinning magnet actually doing to the wire?
By violently rotating massive magnetic fields across conductive copper stators, the generator introduces continuous rhythmic discomfort into the SVE substrate.
It's vibrating the vacuum.
It is literally agitating the structured vacuum. And because the entire national power grid is a continuous, highly sensitive tension channel connected to that generator, the entire grid shares that exact rhythmic discomfort simultaneously.
Oh, this explained alternating current perfectly.
Doesn't it?
An AC grid operates at a very specific frequency, 60 hertz in North America, 50 hertz in Europe. We treat that frequency just as a mechanical byproduct of the generator's RPM.
Just a spinning magnet.
But under UED, 60 hertz is the fundamental heartbeat of the field's discomfort. We have built a continent-sized web of copper and aluminum, and we are violently vibrating the vacuum inside it 60 times a second.
You've got it.
We are broadcasting a harmonic frequency of structural agony across thousands of miles.
Which forces us to totally redefine what a household appliance actually is.
Okay, yeah. What is a toaster?
When you plug a toaster or a lamp into the wall, that device isn't consuming the energy flowing from the power plant. The device is a mediator of discomfort.
A mediator of discomfort.
It is an engineered endpoint, a specific physical geometry where the 60 hertz ripple tension of the grid is permitted to resolve itself locally.
So when the tungsten filament in an incandescent bulb lights up, it isn't burning energy.
No.
It is providing a high-friction geometric environment where the vacuum strain forces a violent local realignment. And the visible heat and light are just the exhaust of that local tension snapping back.
Exactly. We didn't build a power delivery system. We accidentally built a continent-sized ripple instrument, and we play it by vibrating the vacuum.
It forces a total ontological reset of electrical engineering. I mean, my mind is kind of blown right now.
It's a lot to take in.
But if we follow this logic from the wire to the vacuum, we have to talk about the vacuum itself and what supposedly moves through it. Because if electrons aren't traveling down wires, we must confront the most famous traveler in all of human science.
We have to talk about light.
Light, the ultimate cosmic courier. For over a century, classical physics has been trapped in a deeply agonizing paradox regarding light, right? Wave-particle duality.
The big mystery.
Young's double-slit experiment showed light acting as a continuous interfering wave. But then Einstein's photoelectric effect showed light acting as a discrete physical packet, knocking electrons out of metals like a tiny billiard ball.
Yeah.
How can it be both?
It can't. And Chavan argues that wave-particle duality is not some profound mystical truth of the universe. It is a mathematical patchwork solution for a fundamentally broken transmission-based model.
It's just a Band-Aid.
Exactly. We invented the concept of the photon, a massless particle that miraculously possesses momentum because human beings have a deep psychological addiction to thingness.
We desperately need a noun. If a star shines and my eye perceives it, our brains demand that a physical thing must have left the star, crossed the void, and arrived at my eye to deliver the message.
We needed a courier, so we hallucinated the photon.
Wow.
But Chavan makes a definitive, uncompromising declaration in his work. He says light is not an entity, it is not a particle, and it is not a traveling wave. It does not travel, it is not emitted, and it is not absorbed.
If you are an optics researcher or an astrophysicist, I know that statement sounds like pure heresy. Light does not travel. Let's ground this in a highly specific scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am standing in a pitch-black room and I turn on a battery-powered flashlight and point it at the wall, classical physics says billions of photons are streaming out of the LED, flying through the air and bouncing off the plaster. If nothing is traveling, what is physically happening in that room?
To explain this, we have to introduce one of the most vital mechanical concepts in the entire UED framework, the alignment threshold time, or ATT.
ATT.
Think of the SVE, the vacuum field, as a highly structured, rigid matrix. When the battery agitates the LED, it creates a localized high-frequency ripple in the SVE's tension geometry.
Right.
But this ripple does not detach from the LED and fly through the room like a bullet.
It stays local to the source.
The primary tension is local, yes. But remember, the SVE permeates the entire room. It instantly connects the structural geometry of the LED to the structural geometry of the plaster wall.
Because it's all one continuous field.
Exactly. When the disturbance occurs at the flashlight, the surrounding field immediately reconfigures its local ripple phases to manage the strain. The SVE attempts to find a balanced resolution between the agitated source and the resting environment.
So how does the wall become illuminated? Like, why do I see the circle of light on the wall?
Through what Chavan terms the coherence handshake.
The coherence handshake.
The field negotiates the geometric tension between the LED and the specific atomic structure of the wall. When the field successfully aligns the ripple phase of the source with the ripple phase of the destination, a closure event occurs.
A closure event.
The source and the wall instantly share a harmonized geometric state.
And where does the alignment threshold time come in? The ATT.
The ATT is the universal refresh clock. It is the strict temporal threshold that dictates when a ripple interaction becomes a measurable physical event.
So the interaction is constantly happening below the threshold.
Right. You don't see the light on the wall because a photon bullet smashed into it. The illumination appears at the exact moment the field tension resolves in a way that crosses the wall's ATT.
Oh, wow.
Light is an instantaneous coherence handshake. It is a localized event of geometric alignment, not a moving messenger.
But wait, a flashlight in a room is basically instantaneous anyway. Let's scale this back up to the distant star from the very beginning of this deep dive.
Okay, the supernova.
The star that is 5 billion light years away. Classical physics says the delay in seeing that star is strictly due to the fact that the photon had to physically cover a distance of 50 billion trillion miles.
Right. Speed equals distance over time.
Right. But if light doesn't travel, and the coherence handshake is an instantaneous phase alignment, why does it take 5 billion years for us to see the supernova? Why isn't the sky just a blinding, instantaneous whiteout of all cosmic events happening all at once?
That is the crucial question, and it requires us to completely redefine cosmic distance. In UED, distance across the universe is not a measure of spatial separation.
It's not.
No. It is a measure of ripple delay.
Ripple delay. How does the vacuum delay in alignment?
You have to visualize the SVE on a massive cosmic scale. It is not an empty, perfectly smooth void. It is a highly complex, distorted structural matrix.
Right, filled with stuff.
Filled with immense gravitational gradients from supermassive black holes, magnetic shears from massive nebulae, and thermal turbulence from galaxy clusters. Every time the field attempts to initiate a coherence handshake across the cosmos, it cannot just draw a straight line.
The structural path is tangled.
Exactly tangled. The field's ripple resolution chain has to mathematically process, rebalance, and negotiate every single gravitational and magnetic distortion between the supernova and your eye.
Like a massive cosmic calculation.
Yes. It is an unimaginably complex chain of localized tension resolutions occurring sequentially through the SVE matrix, and that structural processing takes time.
I see.
It takes 5 billion years of local field rebalancing and geometric calculation before the phase alignment at your specific observer node crosses the ATT threshold for perception.
So the delay isn't because a tiny physical particle is tired from flying across the universe.
No.
The delay is because the universe is essentially buffering. It is doing the localized thermodynamic and geometric math of alignment across a highly distorted matrix.
Buffering is the exact mechanical reality, which leads us to dismantle the ultimate sacred cow of modern physics. C, the speed of light.
Oh boy.
299,792,458 meters per second. The absolute unbreakable speed limit of reality.
Right. I mean, Einstein's entire theory of special relativity is predicated on the idea that the speed of light is constant for all observers, no matter how fast they are moving. If nothing is physically traveling, what is c?
Chavan redefines c not as a velocity, but as a systemic processing limit.
Okay.
Mathematically, he states that c equals delta r, a line divided by delta tau field.
Wait, so if c is a ratio of range to response time, how does Chavan actually define those variables mathematically? Because delta r and delta tau sound an awful lot like classical kinematics.
Yeah.
Distance over time. How does this escape the transmission model?
It escapes it because neither variable represents a moving object. Delta R align is the maximum geometric range across the SVE over which a localized ripple can maintain a coherent phase relationship without degrading into background thermal noise.
Okay, so it's a spatial limit.
It is the spatial limit of a single alignment calculation. And delta tau field is the absolute minimum Planck scale tick, the fundamental response time the vacuum requires to update its local geometric state.
It's the clock speed of the universe's processor.
Precisely. Therefore, c is not a travel velocity. It is a rate of structural processing.
A refresh rate.
It is the absolute maximum refresh rate of the field's alignment resolution. No geometric ripple can realign faster than the fundamental time it takes the SVE to process local equilibrium.
Oh my God, this completely rewrites why the speed of light is constant.
It does.
In classical relativity, we have to invent mind-bending concepts like time dilation and length contraction. You know, the idea that space physically squishes and clocks literally slow down just to mathematically ensure that a photon always measures at the same speed.
Right, it's very messy.
But under UED, c is constant simply because you cannot force the vacuum of the universe to rebalance its structural tension any faster than its fundamental processing limit.
It replaces a deeply convoluted model of transit with a highly elegant model of transition. Once you break the psychological habit of thinking of cosmic distance as a physical separation requiring a traveler, you stop asking how light travels.
And you start asking what?
You start asking the much more terrifying question. Why did we ever assume the universe was acting independently of us?
Oh, wow. That brings us to a really critical turning point in this deep dive.
It does.
Because if light isn't a courier delivering a pre-written message, if light is a coherence handshake that requires an endpoint to resolve the tension, this places an extraordinary, undeniable physical burden on the entity doing the seeing.
The observer.
The observer.
It forces a transition from the classical idea of vision as reception to vision as participation.
Right. In the standard model, the observer is totally passive. The universe puts on a grand play, a star explodes, photons are fired out in all directions, and you just happen to be sitting in the cosmic audience catching the ones that hit your telescope.
Right. If you close your eyes, the photons just harmlessly smash into your eyelid. The universe does not care if you are watching.
But in the UED framework, the play does not happen. The tension does not resolve into a visible event unless there is a localized geometric node capable of completing the handshake.
Right. Let's look at the biology of the human eye under this framework. Your retina is packed with millions of photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, filled with highly complex opsin proteins.
Receptors.
Classically, we treat these proteins as little catcher's mitts waiting for a photon to hit them. But under UED, your retina is a highly tuned, field-sensitive structural matrix.
An active interface.
It's an active geometric interface designed by evolution to detect and synchronize with specific high-frequency SVE tension variations.
So when I look at a green leaf on a tree, my eye isn't passively catching green light bouncing off the chlorophyll.
No.
My biological field geometry is actively entering into phase synchrony with the ripple tension of the leaf's molecular structure. We are harmonizing.
Harmonizing is exactly the word, which leads to what is arguably the most profound, reality-altering statement in Chavan's texts. He calls it Chavan's law.
Okay, what is it?
It states rigorously and unequivocally, no observation occurs without alignment.
No observation without alignment.
You, the conscious observer, embedded in a biological structure, are a highly concentrated, localized ripple field yourself.
Me personally.
Yes. Your specific structural presence dictates a localized ATT threshold. Your physical awareness actively defines what gets resolved from the formless, vibrating potential of the SVE into manifested reality.
So the vacuum tries to align with me.
The vacuum aligns ripple tensions toward you, but they only become real. They only collapse into measurable visibility because your biological geometry is in a state ready to resolve them.
Seeing is not a mechanical input of data.
No.
Seeing is the first appearance of meaning emerging through ripple alignment. You are not a spectator watching a dead universe. You are a field engineer.
A field engineer.
By simply looking, you are forcing the localized vacuum to collapse its structural tension into coherence.
Light is not the cause of sight. It is the consequence of awareness alignment. The universe is not sending you light. You are resolving it into existence.
That immediately makes me think of the classic Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics and, the infamous double-slit experiment.
Oh, of course.
For decades, physics has been tormented by the measurement problem. We fire a single electron at a barrier with two slits, and it acts like a smeared-out wave of probability, supposedly going through both slits at once.
The interference pattern.
Right. But the exact moment we place a detector at the slits to measure which one it went through, the wave function instantly collapses, and it acts like a solid, discrete particle. It's as if the universe knows we are looking.
And classical physicists hate that, because it implies consciousness affects reality, which just feels like mysticism.
Totally. But under UED, the measurement problem is completely demystified through strict structural mechanics, right?
Completely. There are no probability waves, and there are no solid particles. There is only ripple configuration in the SVE.
So what happens when we place the detector at the slits?
Well, a detector is not a passive camera. A detector is a massive, highly specific, localized observer node with a strict, engineered ATT threshold.
Right. It's a physical object we put in the field.
When you introduce that heavy structural geometry into the experiment, the vacuum must account for it. The field is forced to resolve its local tension through a coherence handshake with your detector.
Ah. So the collapse of the wave function isn't magic.
No, it is simply the SVE snapping into a discrete phase alignment because your detector demanded a resolution event.
You force the handshake. By introducing a new geometric constraint, you force the vacuum to stop buffering and provide a local resolution. You transform the universe from something we look at into something we look through.
The event creates the structural tension, but the observer, whether it is a silicon detector or a human retina, provides the necessary geometry for resolution.
Man, if we accept this, if observation is just alignment and energy is just vacuum tension, then everything humanity has built over the last 2 centuries is essentially functioning by accident.
We've been stumbling in the dark.
We have been brute forcing our way through the dark. If we actually engineered machines to harness this alignment on purpose, what would our technology look like? How does UED alter the future of human engineering?
It represents the greatest technological pivot in the history of our species. We will move away from the violent, forceful engineering of the past, where we smash atoms, combust ancient carbon, and shove electrons down highly resistant wires.
Riddance.
And we will move toward ripple-aligned technology. We will engineer materials strictly for harmonic compatibility with the SVE.
Let's apply that to the backbone of the modern digital age. How does a semiconductor work under a UED engineering paradigm?
Well, today, a p-n junction in a silicon semiconductor works by physically gating the flow of electrons. It's essentially a microscopic mechanical dam creating heat and resistance.
Right, which is why our computers get hot.
Exactly. In a UED-engineered future, semiconductors will become pure ripple-aligned interfaces. They will function as microscopic ATT threshold gates, granting or denying local vacuum ripple permission based purely on geometric alignment.
So no flowing electrons.
Because there is no physical flow to block, there's no thermal friction. Computing becomes a completely lossless, room temperature orchestration of field tension.
Wow, that sounds suspiciously like room temperature superconductivity.
It is related, yes.
Right now, we think of superconductors as exotic materials cooled to near absolute zero, where electrical resistance magically vanishes. How does UED view a superconductor?
Classical physics explains superconductivity using Cooper pairs, the idea that electrons are supposedly pairing up to glide through the lattice without hitting anything. UED completely rejects this.
Okay, so what is it?
Superconductivity is simply the physical materialization of pure, unbroken field harmony. It is a material state that perfectly matches the resting geometry of the SVE, allowing ripple tensions to resolve instantaneously without generating localized thermal shear.
Without generating heat.
Exactly. If we decode the exact structural geometry of that harmony, we don't need extreme cold. We can engineer room temperature materials that perfectly resonate with the vacuum.
And what about quantum computing? We talked about quantum entanglement earlier, that spooky action where two particles seem to communicate faster than light across vast distances.
Entanglement is perhaps the most elegant proof of UED. There are no two particles communicating. There is no faster-than-light signal.
Then what's connecting them?
There is only a shared ripple identity across the structured vacuum. Because distance is just a measure of ripple delay caused by structural mismatch, if you engineer two physical nodes to possess the exact same highly specific geometric ATT conditions, they resolve their vacuum tension simultaneously.
To a vacuum, they are the same thing.
They are the same node to the vacuum. Future quantum devices won't be fragile, probabilistic machines trying to isolate qubits in deep freezes. They will simply engage in precise ripple logic, utilizing the field's own inherent coherence handshake.
Let's look at the macro scale. Climate change, energy generation, the survival of our civilization.
One big stuff.
Right now, we look at solar panels and wind turbines as green extractors. A solar panel catches photon bullets. A turbine extracts kinetic wind energy. How does UED reframe renewable power?
It reframes them not as extractors, but as resonant receivers, translators of tension.
Translator.
The solar panel is not a catcher's mitt. It is a specific crystalline geometry tuned to the exact ripple frequency of the sun's structural misalignment. It provides a local endpoint for that cosmic tension to resolve, and we harness that resolution as localized current. Once we understand that we are basically designing ripple instruments, we can engineer metamaterials that resonate with the ambient baseline tension of the SVE directly. We wouldn't even need sunlight or wind. We could draw resolution directly from the vacuum's constant microfluctuations.
And what about nuclear fusion? The holy grail of clean energy. We are currently spending billions building massive tokamak reactors, using incredibly powerful magnets to squeeze plasma to 100 million degrees, hoping to smash hydrogen isotopes together.
And we struggle because we're fighting the vacuum instead of working with it.
Right.
SVE-aware reactor design wouldn't rely on chaotic thermal plasma and brute force confinement. Remember, fusion and fission are just structural rearrangements of mass, ripple disintegration.
So how would an SVE reactor do it?
A UED-based reactor would geometrically trigger this disintegration. It would use highly calibrated ripple interference patterns to unbind the atomic structure, allowing the heavy nuclei to transition to a lower tension state cleanly.
Cleanly? No massive heat buildup.
No chaotic thermal plasma, no dangerous radioactive neutron radiation, just pure, mathematically controlled resolution of field strain.
We stop being miners violently pulling coal out of the earth, and we start being musicians carefully tuning an instrument to the resonant frequency of a room.
That shift from mining to tuning implies a total philosophical and practical evolution for our species. Right now, our civilization measures its success, its GDP, and its global dominance by how much it extracts, burns, and consumes.
We measure a nation's development by its energy consumption.
Exactly. We are entirely a civilization of transmission, extraction, and consumption.
But if we fully embrace universal energy dynamics, we transition into a ripple-based civilization.
A ripple-based civilization.
A civilization that measures its technological success by how much structural alignment it leaves behind. It would operate on the core principle of minimal ripple conflict. We would design our cities, our transportation grids, and our digital networks not to brute force their way through the environment, but to harmonize seamlessly with the underlying geometric stillness of the universe.
We would no longer ask, how much power did it take to move this train? We would ask, how smoothly did this system resolve its geometric tension?
That fundamentally changes our relationship with reality.
It is a shift from extraction to permission. The quality of our civilization becomes the quality of permission we give to the universe to resolve its inherent tension through us.
Let's pull back and look at the massive intellectual journey we have just taken the listener on.
It's been a ride.
We started by dismantling the sacred concept of energy itself. Energy is not a fluid, not a substance, and not a causal force. It is the field's fever, a symptom of structural misalignment within the structured vacuum energy.
Right, and we completely redefined the mechanics of electricity. It is not a flow of electrons through a copper pipe, but a synchronized, localized negotiation of structural discomfort.
Our power grids are tuning forks vibrating the vacuum, and our devices are simply mediators allowing that tension to find local resolution.
We shattered the Courier myth of light. There is no traveling photon. Light is an instantaneous coherence handshake, a geometric closure event determined by the alignment threshold time.
And the speed of light, c, is merely the maximum structural refresh rate of the vacuum matrix.
And most importantly, we reframed the role of the observer. You are not a passive audience member sitting in a dead universe. You are a critical alignment node. Your biological and structural awareness actively dictates the collapse of universal tension into observable meaning.
Which brings us to the end of this deep dive. And as always, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to mull over as you walk back to the lab or look up at the night sky, something that pushes the boundary of Chavan's math into profound new territory.
Well, think about this. If human biology, the photoreceptors in the eye, the synaptic web of the brain, the very act of conscious observation, if all of these are essentially localized SVE alignment engines,
right,
and our active vision dictates the geometric collapse of universal tension into reality, what happens when we scale this concept up?
What do you suggest?
If the universe is a structured vacuum perpetually waiting for an observer node to provide geometric resolution, could human consciousness itself be the ultimate evolved, ripple-aligned technology?
Whoa.
We have spent billions of dollars and decades of human capital building massive particle accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider, desperately trying to find the fundamental truth of the universe by violently smashing pieces of it together and looking at the debris.
Breaking things to see what's inside.
Exactly. But if UED is the true ontology of reality, the truth isn't found in the violent debris of a collision, it is found in the stillness of alignment.
I see where you're going with this.
Perhaps the next great world-changing leap in physics won't happen inside a massive machine at CERN. Perhaps it will happen through the deliberate mathematical calibration of the human mind to the fundamental refresh rate of reality itself.
But the ultimate instrument for understanding the universe isn't a collider. It's us.
We are the resolution.
You know, it brings us right back to that classical physics classroom we started in. The rigid, comforting clockwork. The clean mathematical certainty of the transmission-based model. We loved that old model because it made us feel like masters of a dead mechanical universe. We thought we were standing outside the machine, pulling the levers and pouring the fuel, but looking through the rigorous lens of universal energy dynamics, that mechanical clockwork looks incredibly small and isolated.
It really does.
We aren't standing outside the machine. We are the very nodes of awareness that allow the universe to wake up and resolve its own beautiful, terrifying tensions.
We do not just measure the universe. We mathematically permit it to exist.
An incredibly profound thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us on this deeply disruptive deep dive into the universal energy dynamics framework of Sandeep Chavan. Until next time, keep questioning the clockwork.